Hi, this is Chris with my Yarning Circle, and let's learn how to knit. We've learned to cast on. If you haven't done it yet, check out my previous video on the long tail cast on. I show a couple different methods to do it. So now I have my stitches cast on. I won't be going over the cast on in this video. This video is only about the knit stitch, and I will show two different methods. I will show the English, or what they call the throwing method, and then I will also show the Continental, or AKA the picking method. We will first start with the English method, and here we go. So if you notice, I put a little bow on my tail because sometimes I can accidentally pick it up and start knitting with it and only get so far. But if I feel my bow, I know I picked up the wrong thing, and now I'll pick up this. So the needle with all the stitches, or the cast on stitches, is going to be in my left hand. And we are going to knit them off and knit them onto the right hand needle. So when I first start, the yarn, the working yarn, which is attached to the ball, will be attached to the left hand needle. But as soon as I do one stitch, it'll be attached to the right. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our right hand needle in through the front of the loop on the needle, just the loop on the needle. We don't want to go underneath. We just want to catch just the yarn that's on the needle. We're going to go front to back and create this X or this T. And see how I can kind of hold it and maintain, just put my fingers and keep that crisscross. Okay. Now I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to go under and over that back needle. I'm going to set my yarn down against the stitch. I'm going to hold it. I'm not going to pull hard. I'm not pulling hard. I'm just kind of holding it a little bit. And now I'm going to slide this needle, this right hand needle, back out where it came from. And there's that wrap. And I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to slide the old stitch off, and now it's on to my right hand needle. Now, the yarn is kept in the back behind the needles. And now we're going to go again. We're going to go in from front to back, just through the loop that's on the on the needle. We're going to go under and over and back through. I'm going to push these up a little bit. It makes it easier. I keep my thumb on the, I kind of keep my thumb on the stitch just behind the one I'm going to work so that I don't let it slide off, and I can move this one up. I don't want to go down below into the here. I want to make sure I'm going just into the yarn that's around the needle. Front to back, crisscross, wrap, under and over. Keep a slightest tension, not much. I don't really keep a lot of tension, just the slightest tension so it doesn't slide off, and pull my needle out and off. Front to back, wrap around, slide it out. And if you notice, I can take my tip of my right hand needle and run it down along the barrel of the left hand needle to help me get it pulled through without taking that wrap off too. As you get more comfortable, it gets easier and easier. You know what the feel's like and you can feel it. And speaking of that, you want to be hitting the hole. You want to hit the hole, the loop, the hole in the loop. You want to be knitting and putting your yarn through the air, the hole. You don't want to be going through something. If you feel like you're pushing it through something, you're probably splitting your stitch. If you do, back it out and redo it. You want to go through and hit the hole or the loop and just be knitting through the air and back around. So again, we're going front to back, under, over, and around, and then sliding the right hand needle back out with the wrap on it still and dropping it off, the old stitch off. I'll push these stitches up a little bit. I'll pull these down a little bit. So I'm going front to back, under, over, putting a little, backward pressure on the yarn to keep that wrap on there. You can see the wrap right down there at the base, and pulling it off. And here we go. I'm going to do real up close and tight for you guys. Front to back. I'm going to go under and over, set the yarn down. Now I'm going to take this tip and I'm bringing it, and see how I'm going to bring it, and I'm going to bring it right back out where it came in from. It goes in through the front, out the back. Now I got to go back. Now we got to go from the back to the front to bring it off. And then this old stitch gets dropped off. Now, you can hold your yarn a few different methods. Some people will try and even drop them in between. I think that's a waste of time and energy, and it's probably not the best yarn management. And when we talk about yarn management, we're trying to find a consistency to which our stitches are. So my stitches are not too tight. See how they can slide? But I'm not sloppy. I don't have this big gaps in them. Okay, you just want to be consistent, and you want to have them be able to move a little bit. So when you're trying to hold your yarn, you can hold it. I see people, all different ways. You talk to 10 knitters, you're going to find 8 different ways to hold your yarn. So some people will pinch it together, pinch their fingers like this, and then wrap it like this and hold it back and pull it through. Wrap, pull through. And if you see, sometimes I use my finger to help me push it through. Okay, some people will put it in their hand like this and then put it over the finger. They just have it gripped, they're just gripping it. And wrap and pull through. Some people go every other stitch, every other finger, up and down, wrap, pull through. My preferred method for me is to go around my pinky underneath the next 2 stitches and then over. But that works for me. You need to find what works for you. But once so it's going to take you a little bit of time to find it, to find your hands, or find the best way that it works for you. So again, it is front to back, under, and then over, pull through, and off. So this is the English or the throwing method, because we are throwing the yarn around and pulling it through. Front to back, under, over, bring the yarn and the wrap, bring the needle and the wrap back over and pull it off. And see, as you can see, I keep my thumb, so when you can see, you only see one stitch because my thumb is on the ones that are behind it, kind of keeping them back a little bit. Don't have to hold them too hard. And we don't want to pull tight, we just want to be consistent. Then I let my next stitch go, and then I get my fingers over the other stitches so that I just can feel them, I can keep control of them. The last stitches are always the worst because it's the easiest for them to fall off. And staying relaxed, keeping your hands relaxed, keeping your yarn relaxed, makes life so much easier. They actually slide so much more when they're relaxed. Now, if you notice, this last stitch looks really loosey-goosey compared to all the others. That's okay. It's going to look loose. Look how nice these all look, and then you got this last one. Don't worry, it's going to tighten up. So now I have all the stitches that I had off my left-hand needle onto my right. So now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to put all these back over into my left hand. You can see that stitch that I just finished, how much looser it is than everybody else. I'm not going to worry about it. And now we're going to start the process again. The yarn needs to be behind. Now, I know this looks loose, and some people make a mistake and they try and tighten it up by doing this. And it's supposed to be 1 stitch. And if you do that, it starts to look like 2 stitches. So you always want to move your yarn under and behind when you're knitting. So I'm going to bring my yarn back here and see how it's loose. It's going to tighten up right now as soon as I knit. I'm going to grab my yarn. I'm going in front to back. Now, do not grab that big loop. Make sure you're grabbing just the loop that's on the needle, not the loop just below the needle. You don't want to grab this down here. You want to grab just the loop on the needle. I'm going to knit it, and look, that loop just got twisted up and tightened up, and it just disappeared. So now you're going to start your next row. Now, this is the English or the throwing method. Now, if you've been an avid crocheter for a number of years, you're used to carrying your yarn in your left hand. So you can, the Continental does the same stitch, everything's the same except they carry the yarn in the left hand instead of the right hand. So usually a lot of crocheters hold their yarn way out, nice big long distance for crocheting. When you're knitting, you can keep it in the same hand, but you want to hold it a little closer. You probably want it to be more like an inch, inch and a half. You don't want it to be 2-3 inches away. You want it to be a little closer. That was probably the biggest thing for me, who came from a crocheting world. I had to retrain my finger to not go way out. So now, if I'm doing this Continental method, I'm holding it in the left hand, but I'm doing the same exact thing. I am going in front to back. I'm going to wrap the same direction and pull it through. Front to back, wrap the same direction, pull through. I just don't have to take my hands off to wrap it because I have it all on the same hand. So I also can just, instead of using my finger to wrap it, I can also use the needle to go up over it and grab it, which creates the same wrap, and pull it through. So I can take the needle front to back, go up and over the yarn on my finger and pull it through. Now, so this is the Continental or the picking method, because they say you're picking that yarn and pulling it through. So I actually almost kind of open up my hole or my loop, and I can grab that yarn. Now, if you did my long tail cast on video and you're familiar, think about this left hand needle being like your thumb needle on the long tail cast on, and this being the crisscross. So remember, when you were doing the long tail cast on, you went between the loop around your thumb, you went over and grabbed the loop on your finger, and then you pulled it through and dropped that loop off. So you're really, when we were doing the cast on, we were doing the same, we were doing the knit stitch, we were just using our fingers instead of our needles. And the same thing if you were doing it this way. This would be like the two-handed cast on, where we put it through our thumb and grabbed it, and then we grabbed and we wrapped, and it was the two-handed method. This is the two-handed method of casting on. So if you watch my video and you do your cast on and you think about it, this is the same thing as your cast on. You're going up through the thumb, which is the left-hand needle. You're going over and grabbing it off the finger, and then you're pulling it through that loop that you just came up through. So you're doing the same thing. Now, again, you don't want to make it too tight. You want these stitches to move and flow, and just keep going. Now, you always want your yarn in the back. The yarn is behind the needles for the knit stitch. You always want to go from front to back, create the X, and either go around, under and over, whether you're doing it English or Continental, and pull through. Now, when you first start knitting, your tension or your yarn management is not good. I always say you got to find your hands. I'm going to flip this over again. I can see my real loosey-goosey stitch right here. I'm not going to go in here. I'm going to make sure I go here. And I'm going to make sure my yarn is going underneath, behind from under. I'm not going over my needle. And I'm pushing it. So if you notice, my yarn is I'm kind of keeping my hands relaxed, and I'm keeping my yarn relaxed. And then I'll pull through. So it'll actually make your life easier. If I put a lot of tension on this, then it's like pulling out a guitar string and it snaps. It wants to snap back. But if I keep it relaxed, I can move that over and move the yarn around and maneuver it the way I want it to be maneuvered. Now, when I teach my beginning knitting class and I teach them just how to do the knit stitch, I tell them to go home, cast on, and just knit and knit and knit 15 to 30 minutes every day. And what that does, it helps you develop the way you want to hold your yarn. Whether you want to be a pincher, whether you want to grab it in your hand this way, whether you want to Continental if you've been a crocheter. And, you know, and if you've been a crocheter, you're going to want to shorten up this distance here. And I say go home and knit 15 to 30 minutes every day. And at first you're going to have some holes, you're going to have some drop stitches, you're going to start out with 40, you're going to go down to 38, then you're going to go up to 42. I wouldn't worry about it. Just keep knitting, because the more you do it, the more you're going to find out how you want to hold your yarn, how you want to find your hands and do your yarn management. And the consistency will come with that. So, and don't rip it out and start over again. Just keep knitting, because at first, let's say you do 3 inches or 3 inches and you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 holes in it. And you got to drop stitch or you added stitches. Well, if you rip it out and you do again and you make 2 holes, you're going to be upset you made a mistake. But if you leave it and you do the next 3 stitches, you only got 1 hole versus 3 or 4 when you had the first time. You're going to see how you progress. You're going to see how you've gotten better. So give yourself a chance to see the improvement. So again, front to back, up and over, pull it off. Next one. Happy knitting.